Elliot Raines has exactly $4.50 in his pocket, money meant for his mother's heart medication, the kind she can't go without, and the pharmacy is closing soon, which means if he misses it, tonight becomes dangerous. He's already working 2 jobs, already skipping meals, already stretching every dollar until it nearly breaks. Then he sees the boy sitting alone on the curb outside the cafeteria, with no lunch, no backpack, just worn-out shoes, and eyes that follow every tray of food, like he's trying not to be hungry. Students pass without noticing, and teachers walk by like he isn't even there. Elliot knows that look too well, the kind of hunger that stays quiet. If he buys an extra meal, his mother doesn't get her medicine. If he walks away, no one will blame him. The boy glances up, and that's enough. Elliot turns, buys 2 lunches, and sets one beside him, beginning something that will change both their lives. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from and make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Elliot dragged his mop across the worn tile floor. The morning sun hadn't yet peeked through the windows of Booker Hale High, but he'd already been working for an hour. His muscles ached from yesterday's double shift, the school during the day and the grocery store at night. "Lord, give me strength," he whispered, wringing out the mop. The bucket water had turned a murky gray. He'd need to change it soon. His mind wandered to the stack of bills waiting on his kitchen table. Rent was due Friday. Mama's heart medication needed refilling tomorrow. And now the bathroom sink leaked so bad he'd had to shut the water off completely. 3 problems, but his next paycheck would only solve one. The hallway clock read 6:45 a.m. when Principal Winters strode past, coffee in hand. "Morning, Elliot," he said without slowing. "Morning, sir." Elliot straightened his back, but the principal had already turned the corner. By 8 o'clock, students began filling the hallways. Elliot moved methodically from classroom to classroom, tightening loose desk legs with the screwdriver he always kept in his pocket. In room 112, he found a broken window latch and fixed it without being asked. "You're a lifesaver, Mr. Raines," Ms. Peterson said, marking attendance. "I reported that 3 weeks ago." Elliot just nodded. "No trouble, ma'am." At the cafeteria, he spotted Mildred counting coins at a table, her face drawn with worry. "Everything all right, Miss Pike?" he asked. She looked up, embarrassed. "Car wouldn't start this morning. Had to take the bus. Now I'm short for the ride home." Without hesitation, Elliot reached into his pocket and placed $3 bills on the table. "Mr. Raines, I couldn't—" "Please. I'm heading that direction anyway." They both knew it wasn't true. Later, during his break, Elliot noticed Dana Holloway fanning herself in her classroom. The old box fan in the corner sat silent. "Motor's burned out," she explained, wiping sweat from her forehead. "I've got 30 kids coming in 20 minutes. Elliot examined the fan, then disappeared to his supply closet. He returned with tools and a small motor part he'd salvaged months ago. "Should hold until the school gets you a proper replacement," he said 15 minutes later, as cool air began to circulate. Ms. Holloway smiled. "You know, Elliot, you should be teaching shop class, not cleaning it." He allowed himself a small smile, but said nothing. Behind the gym, he shared half his morning biscuit with the skinny, stray dog that had been hanging around for weeks. The dog's tail wagged gratefully. Sometimes Elliot dreamed of a different life. A small storefront with tools hanging on the walls, neighborhood boys learning to fix things, staying off the streets, earning honest money. A trade center where he could pass on what his grandfather had taught him. But dreams cost money, and money was something he never had enough of. At lunchtime, Elliot counted the cash in his wallet. $17.32. Barely enough for groceries and Mama's medication copay. He sighed, tucking the worn leather wallet back into his pocket. As he headed outside for his lunch break, Elliot noticed a thin black teenager sitting alone on the curb. The boy wore jeans that were too short and a faded t-shirt. He stared at the other students eating lunch, then quickly looked away, pretending to be occupied with something on his phone. But Elliot recognized hunger when he saw it. the hollow cheeks, the way the boy's eyes followed every sandwich, every bag of chips. Elliot looked down at his dented lunch pail, feeling the familiar weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. Elliot stepped out into the midday sun, his lunch pail swinging gently against his leg. The air was thick with humidity, promising rain later. His eyes found the boy again, still sitting alone on the curb, shoulders hunched like he was trying to make himself smaller. As Elliot approached, the teenager's eyes darted to the paper bag in Elliot's hands, then quickly away. His jaw tightened, pride battling hunger. Elliot recognized that look, the careful mask of someone pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. "Mind if I sit here?" Elliot asked, gesturing to the empty space on the curb. The boy shrugged, scooting over slightly. "Free country." Elliot settled down, knees creaking. Up close, he noticed more details. The boy wore no backpack. His shoes were worn through at the edges, laces frayed and double-knotted to keep them from breaking. His fingernails were clean, but bitten to the quick. Most telling was his stillness, the careful conservation of energy that came from practice. "I'm Elliot. Work maintenance here." He opened his lunch pail, the aroma of peanut butter filling the air between them. Isaiah Bell." The boy's voice was soft, but clear, with an unexpected depth. "Forgot your lunch today?" Elliot asked, though he already suspected the answer. Isaiah stared at the pavement. "Something like that." A group of laughing students passed by, their trays loaded with cafeteria pizza. Isaiah's eyes followed them, then dropped back to his hands. Elliot recognized the math instantly. This wasn't a one-day problem. This was the careful calculation of poverty, the same one Elliot made every month. His sandwich would get him through till evening. After work, he needed to pick up Mama's medicine, fix that leaking pipe, maybe catch a few hours' sleep before his night job. Every dollar was already spoken for. But some things mattered more than money. "Hold up a minute," Elliot said, standing. "Forgot something inside." 5 minutes later, he returned with a cafeteria tray holding a hot lunch, pizza, green beans, chocolate milk, and an apple. It had cost $4.50, money meant for his own dinner. He'd have to skip that meal, but he'd gone hungry before. "Here," he said, setting the tray next to Isaiah. "Cafeteria lady gave me extra. Can't eat all this myself." Isaiah looked up, eyes sharp with understanding. "You don't have to." "Would be a shame to waste," Elliot interrupted gently. "Besides, I already paid." For a moment, the boy didn't move. Then hunger won out. He took the tray, nodding thanks. His first bite was careful, measured. By the third bite, his restraint crumbled. He ate with the focused intensity of someone who didn't know when the next meal would come. Elliot unwrapped his peanut butter sandwich, taking small bites to make it last. "You know," he said casually, "these cafeteria ladies think I'm still growing, always trying to fatten me up. You'd be doing me a favor, helping eat all this food." That earned him a small smile, the first he'd seen from Isaiah. The tightness around the boy's eyes eased a little. "You a freshman?" Elliot asked. "Yeah." Isaiah wiped his mouth with a napkin. "Just started last month." They sat in comfortable silence until the warning bell rang. Students began streaming back toward the building. Isaiah stood, brushing crumbs from his jeans. "Thanks," he said, looking at his shoes rather than at Elliot. Then, almost too quiet to hear, "I'm hungry most days." Elliot watched him walk away, carrying nothing but shame and gratitude, shoulders a little straighter than before. The alarm buzzed at 4:30 a.m. Elliot reached out from under the thin blanket and silenced it with a practiced tap. His stomach growled, a sharp reminder of last night's skipped dinner. The floorboards creaked beneath his feet as he shuffled to the kitchen in the pre-dawn darkness. At the small kitchen table, he spread out the bills: electric notice, final warning, pharmacy receipt, rent due in 10 days. He counted the remaining cash twice, arranging the worn bills in neat stacks. Not enough. Never enough. He'd have to pick up an extra shift at his weekend job. A cough rattled from the bedroom down the hall. "Elliot? That you already?" Laverne's voice was thick with sleep and the ever-present congestion. "Morning, Mama. Just getting ready for work." He quickly gathered the bills, tucking them into his wallet. The floorboards announced her approach before she appeared in the doorway, wrapped in a faded robe. Her eyes, sharp despite her illness, took in his hollow cheeks and the empty stovetop. "Did you eat enough last night?" "I fell asleep before you got home." Elliot smiled, the lie ready on his lips. "Yes, ma'am. Had a sandwich at work." He busied himself making her tea, avoiding her eyes. "Your medicine's on the nightstand. Don't forget the blue pill with breakfast." "You're too skinny," she muttered, but accepted the steaming mug with grateful hands. On the bus to Booker Hale, Elliot promised himself he wouldn't get attached to the boy. Isaiah wasn't his responsibility. He had enough people depending on him. But when noon arrived and he spotted Isaiah back on the curb, pretending to check a phone with a cracked screen, that promise crumbled. The boy was scanning the parking lot, acting like he was waiting for someone, but Elliot recognized hunger when he saw it. With a sigh, he counted out enough coins for 2 cheap cafeteria meals. The lunch lady raised an eyebrow at his double order but said nothing. Outside, Elliot settled beside Isaiah without ceremony. "Meatloaf today. Not half bad." Isaiah's shoulders relaxed when he saw the tray. "Thanks," he said, taking it without argument this time. They ate in comfortable silence. The next day, it happened again. And the next. By the second week, Isaiah was waiting for him, no longer pretending he wasn't hungry. By the third, they had conversations that stretched beyond food. "Dad split when I was 8, Isaiah explained one day, pushing corn around his plate. "Mom works night shift cleaning offices. She's asleep when I leave for school." Elliot nodded, understanding the math. Food runs out before the month does. "Yeah." Isaiah's voice was matter-of-fact, without self-pity. "She tries, though." Elliot never lectured or offered empty advice. He just listened. Sometimes that was worth more than food. One Tuesday, he took Isaiah to the boiler room during their lunch break. "Hand me that wrench," Elliot said, pointing to his toolbox. He guided Isaiah's hands as they tightened a loose hinge. "See? Nothing to it." "Why are you teaching me this?" Isaiah asked. "Knowing how to fix things means you'll never go without work," Elliot replied. "And remember something. Being poor isn't the same as being worthless. World tries to tell you different, but don't you believe it." Isaiah's expression changed then, something shifting behind his eyes. October turned to November. Leaves fell. Mornings grew colder. Elliot's wallet grew thinner, but he never missed their lunch. Not once. On a rainy Thursday in mid-November, they sat under the awning by the side entrance, steam rising from their hot lunch trays. Isaiah was laughing at Elliot's story about the time he'd fixed the principal's chair, only for it to collapse during an important meeting. A shadow fell across them. Dana Holloway stood there, clutching a stack of papers to her chest, her eyes moving from the food to Isaiah to Elliot. "Mr. Raines," she said quietly. "Could I speak with you a moment?" She glanced at Isaiah, concern etched on her face. "How long has this been going on?" The rain created a soft drumming against the awning, drops splashing onto the pavement just inches from their feet. Dana Holloway's question hung in the air between them. Her eyes, fixed on Elliot, were kind, but worried. "Isaiah, why don't you head inside and finish your lunch?" Elliot suggested gently. The boy hesitated, glancing between them before gathering his tray and walking just far enough away to be polite, but not too far to hear their conversation. "It's been about 3 weeks now," Elliot admitted, meeting Dana's concerned gaze. "And I don't plan to stop, Miss Holloway. The boy needs to eat." Dana shifted the stack of papers in her arms, her voice dropping. "This is serious, Elliot. If he's not getting proper meals at home—" "I should report this," Dana continued. "The school has protocols. We could connect his family with social services, get them proper assistance." Isaiah's tray clattered to the ground. "No!" His face had gone pale. "Please don't report anything. My mom's doing her best. If they come to our house, his voice cracked, they might take me away from her. Dana's expression softened. Isaiah, that's not how— They took my cousin Marcus when his mom got sick, Isaiah interrupted, his words tumbling out. Please, my mom works so hard. She just doesn't make enough. It's not her fault. Elliot stood up, placing a steady hand on Isaiah's shoulder. Nobody's reporting anything without talking to you first. Right, Ms. Holloway? Dana looked between them, conflict clear on her face. After a long moment, she nodded. There are other ways to help, less official channels. Relief washed over Isaiah's features. But, Dana added firmly, you need to promise me you'll tell us if things get worse at home, okay? Isaiah nodded quickly. I promise. That conversation marked the beginning of their unspoken arrangement. Dana occasionally left grocery store gift cards in Elliot's maintenance locker. Elliot continued buying lunches. Isaiah kept showing up. Seasons changed. The school year ended, and another began. Their lunch routine remained. By sophomore year, Isaiah had shot up 3 inches. His voice deepened. He joined the debate team, discovering a talent for structured argument that surprised everyone, except Elliot. You always did like having the last word, Elliot teased one autumn afternoon, watching Isaiah practice his debate points between bites of cafeteria pizza. That same year, Elliot was promoted to head custodian. The title change came with more responsibility, but barely any additional pay. He still counted coins at the end of each month. When winter arrived, Elliot noticed Isaiah's bare hands, red and chapped from the cold. The next day, a pair of gloves appeared in Isaiah's backpack. Neither mentioned it. Junior year brought college conversations. Isaiah stayed after school for SAT prep sessions. Elliot somehow found money for the testing fees, skipping his mother's birthday present that year. Laverne understood without being told. Meanwhile, Isaiah mentioned his mother's worsening cough, the same hollow sound that echoed through Elliot's apartment at night. She won't go to the doctor, Isaiah confessed one day, frustration lacing his words. Parents can be stubborn that way, Elliot replied, thinking of his own mother. By senior year, Isaiah had become a different person. Confident, articulate, accepted to 3 colleges with partial scholarships. But he still sat with Elliot most days, their lunch routine unchanged despite everything else that had shifted. The final week of school arrived with unexpected swiftness. Elliot found himself counting their remaining lunches with a strange ache in his chest. On the last day, Isaiah appeared in a borrowed graduation gown, practicing his walk for the ceremony the next morning. How do I look? He asked, turning in a slow circle. Like somebody going places, Elliot answered truthfully. They sat longer than usual that day. Isaiah seemed reluctant to leave, picking at his food instead of devouring it like normal. I got into that summer program, he finally said. The one in Chicago. That's great, Elliot said, ignoring the hollow feeling in his stomach. When do you leave? Tomorrow night, right after graduation. They fell silent again, the weight of endings pressing down on them. As the bell rang, Isaiah reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. His fingers lingered on it before he handed it to Elliot. I'm no good at saying things, he mumbled, suddenly looking 14 again instead of 18. Elliot unfolded the note and read, You fed me when nobody saw me. I won't forget. When he looked up to respond, Isaiah was already walking away, shoulders straight, heading toward his future. 20 years passed like water through Elliot's fingers. Seasons changed, students graduated, and the school building aged alongside him. At 52, Elliot's body reminded him daily of those passing decades. Knees that protested each time he knelt to fix a loose tile. Back muscles that tightened after mopping the long hallways. Hands slightly less steady when changing light fixtures. The midday sun beat down on the concrete curb outside Booker Hale High School as Elliot lowered himself carefully to his usual lunch spot. He adjusted his navy uniform shirt, newer than the one he'd worn 2 decades ago, but still bearing the same patch with his name stitched in faded red thread. His lunch pail, at least, had been replaced. The dented metal box had finally given out 3 winters ago, replaced by a plain black insulated bag his neighbor had given him for Christmas. He unwrapped his sandwich, turkey with a thin spread of mayonnaise on wheat bread, and looked out at the neighborhood that had transformed around him. Across the street stood a gleaming coffee shop with outdoor tables, where abandoned storefronts once crumbled. 3 blocks down, luxury apartments had replaced the old corner market. Yet, between these polished new additions, familiar decay remained. Boarded windows, cracked sidewalks, empty lots where promises of development had fallen through. Elliot took a bite of his sandwich and watched a group of students walk by, heads bent toward their phones. None of them noticed him. They rarely did these days, unless something needed fixing. His mother, Laverne, had passed 5 years ago. The small insurance policy had covered her funeral with just enough left to patch the roof of their apartment building. Her last words to him had been about his dream, that neighborhood trade center where boys could learn practical skills. "Don't let it die with me," she'd whispered. But the dream had faded anyway, buried under bills and daily survival. A young girl walked past, her backpack hanging loose on thin shoulders. Elliot recognized the signs, the careful way she watched others eat, how she claimed to not be hungry when friends offered to share. He'd seen it countless times before, in countless students, including Isaiah. Without drawing attention, Elliot placed half his apple and a wrapped granola bar at the edge of the curb. The girl hesitated, then grabbed them quickly when she thought no one was watching. He'd gotten better at this dance over the years. The school district had implemented strict policies about staff-student interactions, well-intentioned rules that sometimes made simple kindness complicated. Elliot wiped his hands and reached for his wallet, pulling out a folded piece of paper so worn at the creases that it had been taped together more than once. He didn't need to read it anymore. The words had been committed to memory years ago. Still, the ritual comforted him. "You fed me when nobody saw me. I won't forget." He chuckled softly. "Old fool," he muttered to himself, carefully refolding the note. 20 years was a long time. People moved on, made new lives, forgot old debts, especially ones they'd never really owed in the first place. The purr of a luxury engine drew his attention. A sleek black SUV with tinted windows glided to a stop at the curb directly in front of him. Elliot tensed, wondering if someone important was visiting the school. Maybe he should make himself scarce. Administrators preferred the maintenance staff to remain invisible when donors or officials came around. Before he could gather his lunch, the rear door opened. A man stepped out, tall, confident, dressed in a suit that probably cost more than Elliot earned in a month. His shoes gleamed in the sunlight, and the watch on his wrist caught the light like a small sun. But it was his face that held Elliot's attention, handsome, assured, vaguely familiar in a way that tugged at his memory. Elliot rose carefully, his knees cracking in protest, unsure whether to expect trouble or instructions. The well-dressed man simply stood there, taking in Elliot's appearance, with an expression that shifted from disbelief to something warmer. Then he smiled, a genuine smile that transformed his entire face. "Mr. Raines," he said, his voice rich and steady. "Elliot Raines." Elliot nodded cautiously. "That's me. Can I help you with something?" The stranger's eyes traveled to the curb where Elliot had been sitting, then back to his face. "You still eating lunch out here?" he asked, his tone laced with something that sounded almost like wonder. Elliot studied the man's features, searching for a connection, some explanation for the familiarity he couldn't place. The stranger waited patiently, letting him look. Then, with deliberate gentleness, the man said, "I said I wouldn't forget." The words hit Elliot like a physical force. He stared, mind racing backward through decades, superimposing the face of a hungry 14-year-old boy over the confident man before him. "Isaiah?" Elliot whispered, hardly daring to believe it. "Isaiah Bell?" Standing beside the open SUV door, Elliot stared at Isaiah Bell, now a wealthy founder in his 30s. The thin, hungry boy had transformed into a man whose presence commanded attention. Students passing by slowed their pace, nudging each other and pointing. From the school entrance, a group of teachers watched with unconcealed curiosity, whispering among themselves. "Isaiah," Elliot repeated, his voice barely audible over the rumble of passing traffic. His hands trembled slightly as 20 years of memories crashed through him like a wave. "I can't believe it's really you." Isaiah's smile widened. "It's me, Mr. Raines. In the flesh." "Look at you," Elliot said, taking in the tailored suit, the confident stance. "All grown up." "Thanks to you," Isaiah replied. A few more students had stopped walking, phones raised as they tried to figure out why their school janitor was talking to someone who looked important enough to have a driver. Isaiah noticed the growing audience. "Would you like to join me?" he asked, gesturing toward the SUV's interior. "Not to show off, I promise. I just thought we might want some privacy before the whole school starts wondering what's happening." Elliot hesitated only briefly before nodding. "Sure. Let me just grab my things." He collected his lunch bag and followed Isaiah into the vehicle. The leather seats were soft, the interior cool and quiet when the door closed behind them. The driver, a woman with silver hair and a professional demeanor, nodded politely in the rearview mirror. "Where to, Mr. Bell?" she asked. "Miller's on 8th, please, Diane," Isaiah replied, then turned to Elliot. "If that's okay with you? It's quiet there. Good food." "I don't need anything fancy," Elliot said, suddenly aware of his worn uniform, the paint stains on his boots. Isaiah smiled. "It's not fancy. Just a place where we can talk." As the SUV pulled away from the curb, Elliot watched his familiar lunch spot disappear from view. 20 years of sitting in that same spot, and now here he was, riding in a vehicle that cost more than he'd earn in a decade. "I can't get over how different you look," Elliot said. "Life takes some unexpected turns," Isaiah replied. "After graduation, I moved in with my aunt to help my mother. She was getting worse by then. 3 months later, she collapsed at work. Heart failure." Elliot's face softened with genuine concern. "Ruth? I'm so sorry." "She's still with us," Isaiah said quickly. "But she couldn't work anymore. It was tough. I almost dropped out of community college to take care of her." "What happened?" "Ms. Holloway happened," Isaiah said with a grateful smile. "Remember her? The English teacher? Dana Holloway? Of course. She still teaches at Booker Hale. She helped me apply for scholarships, wrote recommendations, even drove me to interviews. I got a full ride to study engineering." Isaiah shook his head in wonder. "She told me she'd been watching us, you know. You and me. Those lunches on the curb. She said what you did made her believe in people again." The SUV turned smoothly onto a tree-lined street, passing neighborhoods Elliot rarely had reason to visit. "I started a company 5 years ago," Isaiah continued. "We design technology for schools, affordable tablets, learning software, infrastructure, specifically for low-income districts that get left behind." That's amazing," Elliot said, genuinely impressed. "We're growing fast, too fast sometimes." Isaiah leaned forward slightly. "But I never forgot where I came from, or who helped me when nobody else would." "You didn't need to come back just to say thank you," Elliot said quietly. Isaiah's eyes met his. "Those lunches kept my body going, but what you really gave me was dignity. You treated me like a person when humiliation was swallowing me whole." The SUV pulled up to a modest restaurant with large windows and simple decor. Isaiah waited until the driver opened the door before continuing. "I didn't come just to say thank you," he said as they walked inside. "I came because I need your help." The hostess led them to a corner table away from other diners. After they ordered, Isaiah insisting Elliot get whatever he wanted, Isaiah leaned forward. "I'm launching a community initiative here in the city. Educational support, mentorship programs, practical training, the kind of program that might have helped me back then." He paused. "I want you involved." "Me?" Elliot's brow furrowed. "I'm just a janitor." You're the most important person in that entire school, Isaiah countered. You see what others don't. You understand struggling kids better than any executive with a fancy degree. I don't know. This isn't about using your story as some token success example, Isaiah said firmly. This is about your insight, your approach, the way you help without making people feel small. The waiter brought their drinks. Elliot stared into his water glass, mind racing. Isaiah reached into his briefcase and pulled out a folder. He placed it on the table and slid it toward Elliot. Take a look. No pressure. Just consider it. With hesitant fingers, Elliot opened the folder. His eyes landed on a job description, Community Outreach Director, followed by a salary figure that made his breath catch. It was more money than he'd ever seen, enough to change everything. Isaiah, he began, but found himself at a loss for words. Just think about it, Isaiah said softly. That's all I'm asking. Elliot sat stiffly across from Isaiah, staring at the numbers in the proposal. The salary figure alone made his throat tight. It was more money than he'd ever imagined earning, enough to change everything about his life. Waiters moved silently around them, bringing plates to nearby tables. The lunch crowd created a gentle hum of conversation that filled the restaurant. This can't be right, Elliot finally said, tapping the salary line with his index finger. It's industry standard for the position, Isaiah replied calmly. Maybe even a little low, considering the scope of responsibility. Elliot looked up from the folder. What exactly would I be doing? Isaiah leaned forward, his eyes bright with enthusiasm. You'd be the Director of Community Engagement for the Bell House Initiative. It's going to be a center that combines tutoring, meals, trades training, and family support, all in one building. We've already secured the old Westmore Community Center on Maple. The abandoned rec center? Elliot asked, surprised. He knew the building well, a once vibrant space that had fallen into disrepair over the last decade. The very same. Renovation starts next month. Isaiah's smile widened. Bell House will be everything I needed as a kid, and everything you once told me you dreamed of building. Remember? That day you fixed the boiler and told me you wished you could teach boys to work with their hands? A flush of emotion crossed Elliot's face. You remembered that? I remember everything, Mr. Raines. Elliot shook his head firmly. I can't do this. I'm not qualified. Why not? Look at me. Elliot gestured to his worn uniform. I don't have a college degree. I don't speak like you do. I've never run anything bigger than the janitorial closet inventory. Your entire life has been field experience in exactly what Bell House needs, Isaiah countered. Dignity, patience, practical care. You understand what it means to help someone without making them feel small? That can't be taught in any college. But, before you say no, Isaiah interrupted, raising his hand, there's someone you should meet. Isaiah motioned toward a woman sitting alone at a nearby table. She stood immediately and approached them with confident strides. She wore a crisp blazer over dark slacks, her hair pulled back neatly. Elliot Raines, this is Nia Temple. She's the operations director for Bell House. The woman extended her hand. It's a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Raines. Isaiah has told me so much about you. Elliot stood awkwardly to shake her hand. Ma'am, please, she said with a small smile. It's Nia. She took a seat at their table, opening her own leather portfolio. Isaiah believes you're exactly what Bell House needs, Mr. Raines. Someone who understands our community from the inside. Her tone was respectful, but measured. Elliot noticed immediately that she wasn't simply echoing Isaiah's enthusiasm. And what do you think? He asked. Nia's eyes met his directly. I think Isaiah's assessment of your character is compelling, but I'm also responsible for making sure Bell House succeeds. Our donors expect measurable results, and will need to track outcomes carefully. Nia keeps us grounded, Isaiah explained. She makes sure our ideals translate into actual impact. At least someone's being realistic, Elliot said with a half-smile. I'm being realistic too, Isaiah insisted. Bell House needs your insight, not just another administrator with a fancy resume. Elliot looked between them, feeling overwhelmed. I need time to think about this. Isaiah nodded immediately. Of course, take the evening. The position is yours, if you want it. I'll have the car take you back to school, Isaiah added, checking his watch. You probably don't want to be late for your afternoon shift. 20 minutes later, Elliot sat in the back of the SUV, watching the city pass by through tinted windows. They stopped at a crosswalk where a group of middle schoolers crossed the street, laughing and shoving each other playfully. One boy at the back walked alone, his backpack hanging off one shoulder. Elliot watched him, thinking of Isaiah at that age, thinking of the trade center he had once dreamed of opening, where boys like that could learn skills, feel capable with their hands, find purpose in creating rather than destroying. For the first time in years, the dream felt less foolish, less impossible. But fear settled in beside hope like an old companion, the familiar voice that had always kept his dreams small enough to survive disappointment. That evening in his apartment, Elliot placed Isaiah's offer folder on his kitchen table. Beside it stood his late mother's framed photograph. Laverne Raines smiling from behind wire-rimmed glasses, her church hat tilted at a proud angle. "What do you think, Mama?" he whispered, touching the edge of the frame. "Isaiah thinks I can do this." He opened the folder again, reading the job description more carefully this time. "What if I'm too small for this?" he whispered to the empty room, his mother's silent photograph offering no answers. Back in his one-bedroom apartment, Elliot stood at the stove, stirring a pot of tomato soup. The burner's blue flame flickered beneath the dented pot, casting shifting shadows across the small kitchen. He'd owned the same set of pots since moving out on his own at 19. They'd been hand-me-downs then, already worn from his aunt's kitchen. He poured the steaming soup into a cracked bowl and carried it to the kitchen table where Isaiah's offer letter lay open under the harsh kitchen light. The salary figure still seemed impossible, like a typo someone would correct tomorrow with an embarrassed apology. Elliot blew on a spoonful of soup, his eyes fixed on the paper. His mother's voice came to him then, clear as if she sat across from him. "Don't insult a blessing just because it scares you," Laverne had told him once, when he'd been offered the head custodian position years ago, and hesitated because he feared failing. "I know, Mama," he whispered to the empty room, "but this is different." Was it, though? The scale was bigger, but the fear felt the same. His soup forgotten, Elliot pushed back his chair and walked to the living room window. Outside, the early evening light was fading. 3 kids raced their bicycles down the block, weaving around potholes with practiced skill. They flew past the old corner store, now just another boarded-up storefront with faded graffiti marking its plywood face. When those kids got older, where would they go after school? Who would see their potential before the streets claimed them? Bell House could be that place. The kind of center he'd imagined building someday, with tools and teachers and second chances. What if I failed them? He asked, his reflection in the window. But what if he didn't try at all? The next morning, Elliot arrived at Booker Hale High 30 minutes early, as he had every workday for 20 years. He checked the boiler, swept the main entrance, and then headed to the science wing where a leaky pipe had been reported yesterday. As he tightened the final fitting, Dana Holloway appeared in the doorway of her classroom. She'd been teaching chemistry here for 15 years, and unlike some teachers, she always spoke to Elliot like he mattered. "You're quieter than usual today," she observed, leaning against the doorframe. "Everything okay?" Elliot wiped his hands on a rag. "Got something on my mind." He hesitated, then added, "Isaiah Bell came back yesterday." Dana's eyebrows shot up. "Isaiah? Our Isaiah? He's not a kid anymore. Runs some big tech company now." Elliot stood, his knees cracking. "He's opening a community center. Wants me to help run it." "That's wonderful." Dana's smile faded when she saw his expression. "Isn't it? I'm a janitor, Ms. Holloway. I fix things people can see. Broken locks and leaky pipes. This is different." Dana crossed her arms. "Can I give you some advice, Elliot?" He nodded. "What helped Isaiah wasn't your money. You never had any to spare. It was your consistency. Every day, same spot, same time, you were there. That's what Bell House will need. Someone who shows up, sees what's broken, and fixes it without making a big deal about it. Elliot considered her words. You really think I could do this? I know you can, Dana said firmly. The question is whether you believe it. By lunchtime, Elliot had made his decision. From the quiet of the custodian closet, he called the number on Isaiah's card. I want to do it, he said when Isaiah answered. I'll help with Bell House. That's fantastic, Isaiah's voice crackled through the phone. Can Nia and I stop by the school this afternoon? We'd love to hear your initial thoughts. 3 hours later, Elliot led Isaiah and Nia through the back hallways of Booker Hale. He pointed out spaces that worked, the art room that stayed open late, the library corner where homeless students could nap unnoticed. Bell House needs a laundry room, Elliot said as they walked. Kids come to school in dirty clothes because the laundromat costs too much. They get teased, stop coming altogether. Nia nodded, typing notes into her tablet. Good insight. Evening meals, too, Elliot continued, warming to the topic. Not just sandwiches. Real food families can eat together. And workshops, plumbing, electrical, carpentry, for the teenagers who feel invisible in regular classrooms. This is exactly what I was talking about, Isaiah said to Nia, his voice excited. Elliot understands what these families need because he's been seeing it every day for decades. Nia studied Elliot with new respect. These are practical solutions to real problems. I can build metrics around these programs easily. Elliot realized they weren't just humoring him. They were actually building from his instincts, taking his simple observations and transforming them into something substantial. As the final bell rang and students began flooding the hallways, Isaiah checked his watch. We should wrap up, he said. But before we go, you should know. We have our first major donor presentation in 2 weeks. Elliot froze. 2 weeks? Yes. And you'll be introduced as the heart of the initiative, Isaiah continued, clasping Elliot's shoulder. These people need to hear your vision directly. My vision? Elliot echoed, his momentary confidence suddenly wavering. Your vision, Isaiah confirmed. Because Bell House isn't just my way of saying thank you, Elliot. It's your dream, too. It always has been. 2 weeks later, on the evening of the donor presentation, Elliot stood backstage in an inexpensive new suit Isaiah bought him, tugging at the sleeves while city leaders and investors filled the hall. The jacket felt stiff and foreign against his shoulders, nothing like the soft cotton of his work uniform. Through a gap in the curtain, he could see rows of wealthy people in clothes that cost more than his monthly rent. Stop fidgeting, Nia whispered, straightening his tie for the 3rd time. You look fine. I don't belong up there, Elliot mumbled, his mouth dry as sandpaper. These people run companies. They build buildings. I clean floors. That's exactly why they need to hear from you, Nia said firmly. She checked her watch. Remember, 5 minutes for your story, then Isaiah joins you for questions. Earlier that day, they had practiced in the empty conference room at Isaiah's downtown office. Nia had timed him with a stopwatch while Isaiah paced nearby. Don't try to sound fancy, Isaiah had advised, stopping to rest his hands on the table. Just talk like you talk to me. Tell them why Bell House matters. What if I freeze up? Elliot had asked, the words sticking in his throat even during practice. Then I'll jump in, Isaiah promised. But you won't freeze. This isn't a performance, Elliot. It's your life. Now, standing in the wings with his heart hammering against his ribs, Elliot wasn't so sure. Sweat dampened his collar despite the building's aggressive air conditioning. I can't do this, he whispered to Nia. Get Isaiah. Tell him I'm sorry. Nia looked him straight in the eye. Mr. Rains, for 20 years, you showed up every single day for kids who needed you. Tonight, you just need to show up once more. Before he could protest further, Isaiah's voice boomed through the speakers, introducing Bell House's mission. Then came the words Elliot had been dreading. The heart and soul of this initiative. The reason it exists at all. Please welcome Elliot Rains. The audience applauded politely. Nia gave him a gentle push. Elliot's legs carried him forward as if they belonged to someone else. The stage lights hit his face, hot and bright. Faces blurred in the audience, some curious, some already bored, all waiting for him to justify their presence. He opened his mouth. No words came. 3 seconds passed. 5, 10. Then, instead of the practiced speech, Elliot spoke from a different place altogether. "I've carried a mop at Booker Hale High for 20 years, he began, his voice low but steady. "Most days, nobody sees me. That's fine. I'm not there to be seen." The audience settled, suddenly curious about this man in the ill-fitting suit, with the quiet dignity. "But I see them, the kids who show up hungry, the ones pretending they forgot lunch when really there's no food at home, the ones who wear the same clothes 3 days running because the water bill came first." Elliot's hands stopped shaking. This wasn't a speech anymore. This was truth. Hunger's loud in your own belly, but shame travels quieter. These kids smile and joke while their stomachs are twisting. They're experts at looking fine when they're not. The room had gone completely still. 20 years ago, I saw a boy sitting on a curb, watching others eat. I shared my lunch. That boy is standing in this room tonight. Heads turned toward Isaiah, who nodded solemnly from the side of the stage. Small kindness. One sandwich. But small kindness, day after day, can interrupt a whole life's collapse. Elliot's voice gained strength. Bell House isn't about charity. It's about consistency. Being there before the fall, not after. For the next 3 minutes, Elliot described his vision with simple, powerful words. Laundry facilities so kids could wear clean clothes without shame. Evening meals served family style. Trade skills taught by local craftspeople. A computer lab open weekends. When he finished, the silence lasted only a heartbeat before the room erupted in applause. Isaiah joined him on stage, beaming. "This is why Bell House will work," he said into the microphone. "Because Elliot understands what these families need before they have to ask." The evening transformed after that. A retired contractor stood up and offered to donate tools for the trades lab. A local grocer promised fresh produce deliveries twice weekly. 3 different reporters pressed business cards into Elliot's hand, asking for exclusive interviews. "You've unleashed something powerful here," Nia whispered as she passed by with a stack of completed pledge forms. For one bright evening, Elliot felt truly seen, not pitied or overlooked, but valued for exactly who he was and what he knew. Later, as donors circulated with glasses of wine, Isaiah pulled Elliot aside, his eyes bright with excitement. "We've doubled our funding target," he said. "If the first site succeeds like this, we could replicate Bell House across the state within 5 years." Elliot couldn't find words. The possibility of his small daily acts expanding into something that could help thousands of kids felt too enormous to grasp. As applause still rang in Elliot's ears, a cold-eyed board member named Vernon Price watched from the aisle and asked Nia, "Are we really putting this whole operation in his hands?" The next morning, Elliot arrived at Bell House's temporary office with a spring in his step. He'd barely slept, his mind still buzzing with the applause and handshakes from the night before. The office occupied the second floor of a renovated brick building downtown, with large windows that flooded the space with morning light. Even the receptionist seemed to recognize him, smiling and waving him through without asking for ID. "Good morning," Elliot called out as he entered the main conference room. The cheerful greeting died on his lips. The atmosphere hit him like a cold wall. Isaiah stood by the window, hands jammed in his pockets, jaw tight with anger. Nia sat rigid at the conference table, her normally composed face strained and pale. And at the head of the table sat Vernon Price, the board member from last night, his manicured fingers resting on a thick manila folder. "Mr. Raines," Vernon said, his voice smooth as polished marble. "Please, join us." Elliot took the nearest chair, his stomach knotting. "What's happening?" "Due diligence," Vernon replied, opening the folder. "Standard procedure for anyone in a leadership position." "I told him this wasn't necessary," Isaiah cut in, his words clipped. Vernon ignored him. "Mr. Raines, would you care to explain these?" He slid several papers across the table. Elliot looked down at utility bills marked "Final Notice" from 6 years earlier. His mother's final illness. The months when every penny went to medicine and home care. Or perhaps these, Vernon continued, pushing forward court documents, an eviction filing that Elliot had managed to resolve before it became final. "Where did you get these?" Elliot asked quietly. "Public records," Vernon replied. "Just like your credit history, which shows multiple accounts in collection." Each paper landed like a slap. Hospital bills, credit card debt, the financial wreckage of trying to keep his mother comfortable in her final days. "None of this is relevant," Isaiah said sharply. On the contrary, Vernon leaned back, adjusting his silk tie. Last night, donors pledged nearly $2 million based largely on emotional appeals. Before construction even begins, we need to ensure Bell House is represented by someone who demonstrates sound judgment and financial responsibility. The words sliced through Elliot's pride. Vernon wasn't just questioning his qualifications, he was using Elliot's poverty as evidence of personal failure. "I've never claimed to be perfect," Elliot said carefully. "Those bills came when my mother was dying of cancer." "A sad circumstance," Vernon acknowledged without warmth. "But Bell House isn't a charity case for its director. It's a multi-million-dollar initiative requiring professional leadership." Two other board members who had been silent now nodded in agreement. "The publicity value of your story is undeniable," Vernon continued. "But when donors look deeper, what will they find? A man with no degree, no management experience, and a history of financial troubles." Elliot's ears rang. Just yesterday, his life experience had been called wisdom. Today, it was being reframed as failure. "That's enough," Isaiah stepped forward. "Elliot brings expertise no business degree could provide. Emotional appeals won't satisfy the foundation partners," one of the other board members said. "They'll want credentials. Perhaps a compromise," Vernon suggested, his tone reasonable, though his eyes remained cold. Mr. Raines could serve as a community liaison, a symbolic role. Meet with families, tell his story, leave the actual operations to qualified professionals. The room went quiet. Elliot felt the familiar sensation of becoming invisible while still being present, a feeling he'd known his entire working life. The janitor everyone needed, but no one truly saw. "You want me as a mascot," Elliot said flatly. Vernon smiled thinly. "I want what's best for Bell House." Elliot looked to Isaiah, whose face was twisted with frustrated rage, then to Nia, who wouldn't meet his eyes. He understood now. The dream had always been too big, too far above his station. Without a word, Elliot reached for the visitor badge clipped to his new shirt. He removed it slowly, placed it on the glossy table surface, and stood up. "Elliot, don't," Isaiah said. "We can fight this." But Elliot was already moving toward the door. He wouldn't beg, wouldn't argue. Some walls weren't meant to be climbed, especially paper ones built from documents that reduced a life to numbers and judgments. "Mr. Raines," Vernon called after him, "no one is asking you to leave entirely." Elliot didn't look back. By late afternoon, Elliot was back in his Navy uniform, pushing a mop across the school's main hallway. Students rushed past, laughing and shouting as the final bell rang. None of them noticed the slump in his shoulders, or the distant look in his eyes. The dream that had briefly flared to life had been extinguished as quickly as it had ignited. The door that had opened yesterday had slammed shut today. As he dunked his mop into the rolling bucket, Elliot tried to convince himself it was better this way. No false hopes, no illusions, just the steady work he knew how to do, and the children he could help in small, invisible ways. But the weight in his chest told a different story. The afternoon sun had begun its slow descent as Elliot finished mopping the last hallway. His shoulders ached, not from the physical labor he'd grown accustomed to over decades, but from the weight of humiliation still pressing down on him. He clocked out, nodding to the night security guard who barely glanced up from his newspaper. Outside, The air had that golden quality of late afternoon, the kind that usually lifted his spirits. Today, it just illuminated the ruins of his brief dream. Elliot settled onto the familiar concrete curb outside Booker Hale High, opening his lunch pail with movements slowed by defeat. For a minute there, they almost had me fooled, he muttered to himself, unwrapping a simple sandwich. Almost believed I could be something else. The world had briefly mistaken him for more than a janitor, or so he'd thought. Vernon Price's cold eyes and those damning papers had corrected that misconception quickly enough. A burst of teenage laughter caught his attention. About 15 feet away, two boys sat cross-legged on the grass near the school sign. Elliot recognized them vaguely. Sophomores, he thought. One tall and lanky, the other stocky with glasses that kept sliding down his nose. They were hunched over a small bag of chips, carefully dividing its contents. Elliot watched as the taller boy broke a chip in half to make sure they each got the same amount. The gesture was so familiar, it made his chest tighten. The careful ritual of sharing too little, of making scarcity look like choice, rather than necessity. Without thinking, Elliot stood up. His sandwich sat forgotten on its wrapper as he walked to the street corner where a small convenience store had operated for as long as he'd worked at Booker Hale. The bell jingled as he entered. "Afternoon, Mr. Raines," said the owner, Mrs. Castillo, her reading glasses perched on her nose. "Afternoon," Elliot replied, heading straight to the refrigerated section. He grabbed 4 pre-made sandwiches and 2 bottles of juice, then hesitated at the counter. He counted the bills in his wallet, money that should have gone toward his electric bill. "Just these today," he said, putting the items down. 5 minutes later, Elliot returned to the school curb, this time carrying a plastic bag. Without ceremony or explanation, he approached the 2 boys. "Thought you might be hungry," he said simply, holding out 2 sandwiches and the juice. The boys looked up, startled, then exchanged glances of mingled suspicion and hope. "For real?" the taller one asked. "For real," Elliot confirmed, placing the food between them. He returned to his spot on the curb as the boys tore into the sandwiches with the particular urgency of the truly hungry. It was a small thing, just 2 cheap sandwiches. Yet, in that moment, it felt like the only thing that made sense in a world that had just rejected him. "There you are," came a familiar voice. Dana Holloway walked toward him, her teacher's tote bag slung over one shoulder, car keys jingling in her hand. Her brow furrowed as she took in his work uniform and the quiet defeat in his posture. "What happened?" she asked, sitting beside him. "I thought you'd be at Bell House today." The story spilled out of him. Vernon's ambush, the financial records, the suggestion that he become a mascot rather than a leader. Dana's expression hardened with each detail. "That's outrageous," she said when he finished. "Those pompous, short-sighted—" She cut herself off, her cheeks flushed with anger. "Are you going to fight this?" Elliot shook his head. "What would be the point?" "The point?" Dana looked incredulous. "The point is that man had no right to humiliate you, to reduce your entire life to some credit report." "Doesn't matter," Elliot said quietly. "He's right about one thing. I don't have the education for a job like that." "That's garbage, and you know it," Dana snapped. "Education? You've taught more lessons of character in this school than half the faculty combined." Elliot gazed across the lawn to where the 2 boys were now laughing, their hunger temporarily satisfied. "Vernon Price controls the boardroom. He has the power, but he doesn't get to decide what kind of man I am." As the words left his mouth, Elliot felt something steady inside him, a quiet center that even Vernon's cutting remarks couldn't reach. "Look," he continued, "I've been poor my whole life. That's not news to me. If they think that makes me less capable of helping kids, then Bell House wasn't what I thought it was anyway." Dana opened her mouth to argue further when a sleek car pulled into the school's circular drive. Nia Temple emerged, looking uncomfortable in her tailored blazer and heels on the cracked school pavement. She spotted Elliot and walked over, her usual confidence replaced by hesitation. "May I join you?" she asked. Elliot nodded, making room on the curb. Nia settled awkwardly onto the concrete curb beside Elliot, her designer pants gathering dust from the pavement. She watched as a third student, a girl with braided hair and worn sneakers, approached Elliot with a question about a stuck locker. He listened, nodded, and promised to check it first thing tomorrow. "I owe you an apology," Nia said when the girl left. "I should have spoken up in that meeting." Elliot shrugged. "You were doing your job. My job isn't to stand by while someone gets torn down unfairly." Nia's voice carried genuine regret. "I was afraid of losing the project. I told myself that was professional. But it wasn't right." Twilight had begun to deepen the shadows across the school lawn. The two boys Elliot had fed were now tossing a crumpled paper ball back and forth, their hunger temporarily forgotten. "Vernon doesn't understand what we're trying to build," Nia continued, watching the boys play. "He sees numbers and reputation, not people. Bell House will fail if that's all it becomes," Elliot said quietly. "If you're more worried about how it looks than who it helps." Nia nodded slowly, her gaze tracking the movement of the students around Elliot. The way they approached him without fear. The way he remembered each of their names. The natural authority he carried that had nothing to do with titles or degrees. "They trust you," she observed. "Trust takes time," Elliot replied. "Can't buy it with a fancy building or a press release." Just then, the girl with braids returned, this time with a friend who looked about ready to cry. The second girl whispered something to Elliot about missing the late bus and not having money for another way home. Without hesitation, Elliot pulled out his wallet and handed her enough for bus fare. The transaction was simple, quick, and done with such casual dignity that the girl's shame never had a chance to take root. "Thank you, Mr. Raines. I'll pay you back Friday when my mom gets paid." "No rush," Elliot said gently. "Just get home safe." After the girls left, Nia stared at Elliot with new understanding dawning in her eyes. "You've been doing this all along, haven't you? Not just with Isaiah." "Doing what?" "Being Bell House. Before there even was a Bell House." Elliot looked away, uncomfortable with her scrutiny. "Just doing what anyone would do." "But that's exactly it. Not everyone does," Nia said, her voice gaining intensity. "Vernon thinks Bell House needs polished executives and perfect backgrounds, but what if the real story is this? What if it's about the man who's already been doing the work for 20 years without recognition or a budget?" The last rays of sun caught the dust motes floating in the air between them. Elliot remained silent. "Would you let me document this?" Nia asked suddenly. "Not for publicity stunts or marketing. Just to show what real impact looks like." Elliot frowned. "Not interested in being anybody's charity poster." "Not charity, truth," Nia insisted. "I'd like to come back tomorrow with a small camera team, just to record what naturally happens here. The students who come to you, the way you help." Elliot shook his head firmly. "Nothing staged, no cameras following me around." "Then what about testimony?" Nia suggested, thinking quickly. "People who could speak about what you've done over the years?" Elliot hesitated, still uncomfortable with attention, but less opposed to others sharing their stories. "I need to make this right," Nia said quietly. "Vernon Price thinks he knows what value looks like. I want to show him he's wrong." As darkness settled fully around them, Elliot watched the last students leaving campus. He thought about Isaiah, about the years of lunches and conversations that had mattered more than he'd ever known. "Do what you need to do," he finally said. "But I'm not pretending to be anything I'm not." "That's exactly the point," Nia replied, standing and brushing off her pants. "You never have." She pulled out her phone and began making calls as she walked to her car. First to Dana Holloway, then to the school's records office for contact information on former students, and finally to the community health clinic where Ruth Bell had received care. By morning, Nia had assembled a small but determined team to gather stories about the man who had quietly shaped countless lives at Booker Hale High. Early the next morning, Elliot arrived at Bell House headquarters in his janitor uniform instead of a suit, refusing to costume himself for people who questioned his dignity. The navy blue cotton felt honest against his skin, worn at the elbows but clean, just like his conscience. He'd polished his work boots but hadn't hidden them. This was who he was. It was who he'd always been. The modern glass building seemed to glisten with money. Elliot paused at the entrance, watching men and women in tailored clothes stream through the revolving doors with coffee cups and briefcases. He took a deep breath, straightened his shoulders, and walked in without apology. A receptionist did a double-take. "Sir, are you here for maintenance?" "Board meeting," Elliot replied calmly. "Elliot Raines." Her eyes widened with recognition. "Oh, Mr. Raines, I'm sorry. Second floor. End of the hall." The elevator ride was short, but lonely. Elliot remembered standing in this same elevator with Isaiah just days ago, filled with cautious hope. Now he felt like a man walking back into a room where he'd already been judged and found wanting. The boardroom fell silent when he entered. 12 faces turned toward him, some embarrassed, others calculating. Vernon Price sat near the head of the table, his expression a perfect mask of professional concern. Isaiah stood up immediately, relief visible in his face. "Elliot," he said warmly, "thank you for coming." Nia Temple nodded at Elliot from her seat, dark circles under her eyes suggesting a sleepless night of preparation. "Let's begin," said the chairman, a silver-haired man named Harrison Wells. "We're here to reconsider the role of Mr. Raines in the Bell House Initiative." Vernon Price cleared his throat. "With respect, we've already established the facts. While Mr. Raines has an inspiring personal connection to Isaiah, sentiment cannot effectively run institutions of this magnitude. We need qualified leadership with relevant experience and financial stability." His voice carried the smooth confidence of someone who had never been told no in a boardroom. "I appreciate Mr. Price's concerns," Isaiah replied, his tone surprisingly calm. "But I'd like to change our agenda this morning. Rather than debate abstractions, I want to present concrete evidence." Isaiah nodded to Nia, who distributed folders to each board member. "These materials represent just a fraction of what we gathered in the past 18 hours, she explained. The board members opened their folders. Elliot caught glimpses of photographs, typed testimonials, and financial documents he didn't understand. Isaiah tapped a remote. The wall screen illuminated with the face of an older woman in her 60s. "This is Patricia Miller," Isaiah explained. "Her son was failing out of Booker Hale 15 years ago. The recording played, 'My Tommy was giving up. We couldn't afford tutoring. Mr. Raines stayed 2 hours after his shift, 3 days a week, helping Tommy with math. Never asked for a penny. Tommy's an engineer now in Detroit." Another face appeared, a young black woman in medical scrubs. "I'm Dr. Keisha Davis. When I was 16, I couldn't afford the application fees for college visits. Mr. Raines gave me the money from his own pocket, said it was an investment in the future." Face after face appeared. Students who'd received quiet help with lunch money, bus fare, school supplies, and emergency repairs at their homes. Parents who'd found an advocate when school systems overwhelmed them. Teachers who witnessed Elliot's interventions preventing students from disappearing through the cracks. "The financial implications are equally compelling," Nia continued, directing attention to a spreadsheet. "Using conservative estimates of dropout prevention alone, Elliot's informal interventions have saved the district approximately $720,000 in lost funding over 20 years. Vernon Price shook his head. "Anecdotes don't qualify someone to—" "I'm not finished," Isaiah interrupted firmly. "We've also received letters from 7 new donors who specifically mentioned Elliot's authenticity as their reason for investing. 3 have stated they will withdraw their support if Bell House becomes just another corporate charity project." The energy in the room shifted perceptibly. Board members exchanged glances. The door opened, and Dana Holloway walked in, dressed in a simple blouse and slacks. "I hope I'm not interrupting." Isaiah smiled. "Not at all. Ms. Holloway has requested a moment to speak to the board." Dana looked directly at the board members. I've been teaching at Booker Hale for 27 years. I watched our systems fail, Isaiah Bell. I watched counselors too overworked to notice his hunger. I watched administrators focus on test scores while students couldn't concentrate because their stomachs were empty. Her voice grew stronger with each sentence. And I watched one janitor, just one man, step up daily when our entire educational infrastructure couldn't or wouldn't. The room fell silent. Even Vernon seemed momentarily at a loss. Then he rallied. "This is all very touching," he said with a tight smile. "No one disputes Mr. Raines is a kind man, but kindness is not management. Good intentions are not strategic planning. Bell House needs leadership with appropriate qualifications." Elliot, who had remained silent throughout, finally spoke. His voice was quiet but clear. "Management without moral courage is just maintenance for injustice." The simple sentence landed harder than any polished speech could have. Several board members straightened in their chairs, struck by the plain-spoken truth. "We maintain buildings that leak," Elliot continued. "We maintain systems that let kids go hungry. We maintain the idea that only people with degrees know what hurting people need." He looked directly at Vernon. "I don't want to maintain anything. I want to fix what's broken." A woman at the far end of the table, a community banker who had been silent until now, nodded slowly. "He's right. We're not building a corporation here. We're building a lifeline." Another board member joined in. "The entire purpose of Bell House is to reimagine how we support struggling families. If we can't reimagine what leadership looks like, we've failed before we've begun." Vernon's face hardened. "This is emotional manipulation, not sound governance." Isaiah had heard enough. He reached into his jacket and removed an envelope, placing it deliberately on the table. "This is my resignation letter," he said quietly. "I founded Bell House to repay a debt of gratitude and to create something that embodies the dignity Elliot showed me. If this organization cannot recognize his value, then it no longer represents my vision." He looked around the table. "I will walk away unless Elliot is restored with real authority, not as a figurehead, but as an equal partner in this work." The boardroom fell completely silent as the weight of Isaiah's ultimatum settled over them. The boardroom fell completely silent. The air felt charged, like the moment before lightning strikes. Elliot remained standing, his work boots planted firmly on the polished floor, his expression calm but resolved. He wouldn't beg, and he certainly wouldn't let Isaiah sacrifice everything he'd built. "Isaiah," Elliot said quietly, "you don't have to do this." Isaiah shook his head. "I'm not doing anything I don't believe in." Harrison Wells, the silver-haired chairman, cleared his throat. "I think we should vote on Mr. Bell's proposition." He looked around the table. "The motion is to reinstate Elliot Raines with full authority in Bell House leadership. All in favor?" Hands began to rise. First, the community banker who had spoken earlier. Then 2 more board members. A fourth. A fifth. Vernon Price's face tightened as he watched the tide turn against him. He kept his hand firmly in his lap, his jaw clenched. 8 in favor, Harrison counted. 3 against, with 1 abstention. He turned to Isaiah. "The motion passes. Mr. Raines will be reinstated." But Isaiah shook his head. "That's not enough." "Excuse me?" Vernon's voice cut through the room. "Reinstatement suggests we're doing Elliot a favor," Isaiah replied. "We're not. Bell House needs him more than he needs us." Isaiah stood and walked to the center of the room. "I'm proposing structural changes to our organization. First, we're creating a new leadership model with 2 equal directors. I'll handle funding and expansion. Elliot will oversee neighborhood strategy and program implementation." "This is highly irregular," Vernon protested. "Second," Isaiah continued, as if Vernon hadn't spoken, "we're restructuring our board to include direct community representation. At least 3 seats will be filled by neighborhood residents." Vernon's face flushed red. You can't just rewrite our entire governance structure on a whim. Actually, as founder and majority stakeholder, I can. Isaiah's voice was steel wrapped in velvet. And my third proposal is to remove Vernon Price from program oversight, effective immediately. The room erupted in murmurs. Vernon slammed his palm on the table. This is professional suicide. You're putting a janitor in charge of millions. No, Isaiah corrected. I'm putting a community leader in charge of community programs. The same leader who saved my life when professionals like you were too busy looking at spreadsheets to notice I was starving. Harrison Wells raised a hand for quiet. These are significant changes. We should consider them carefully. I've been considering them since I founded this organization, Isaiah replied. I just lost my way temporarily. He looked at Elliot. What do you say? Will you accept? Elliot didn't answer immediately. His expression remained thoughtful, almost grave. Everyone expected immediate gratitude, but instead they got careful consideration. This isn't about title or salary for me, Elliot finally said. It's about responsibility. If I accept, I need to know I can actually help people, not just talk about helping them. Nia stepped forward. You'll have my full operational support, Elliot. Whatever systems you need to make your ideas work. And what exactly would your role entail? Harrison asked. Designing food programs that don't shame people who need them, Elliot replied. Building trades mentorship that gives kids real skills. Creating emergency aid that reaches families before they fall apart. His voice grew stronger with each point. And making sure Bell House never forgets who it's supposed to serve. Harrison nodded thoughtfully. Those are ambitious goals. They're necessary goals, Elliot corrected. A young assistant hurried into the room and whispered something to Nia, who smiled. Our major donors have been following this meeting in real time, Nia announced. 3 have just increased their commitments, specifically citing our commitment to authentic leadership. Vernon's final objection died on his lips. Isaiah extended his hand to Elliot. So, partners? Elliot looked around the room, meeting each person's gaze directly. I'll accept on one condition. Bell House can never become a monument to one man's kindness. Not Isaiah's, not mine. It has to become a machine that makes quiet rescue ordinary. Isaiah's face broke into a wide smile. That's exactly why you belong here. That answer proves the board chose correctly. Harrison Wells stood up. Then it's settled. Congratulations, co-directors. He glanced at Vernon, who was already gathering his papers. And Mr. Price, we'll discuss your transition at a later date. As the meeting adjourned, board members approached Elliot with handshakes and business cards. The same people who had questioned his qualifications now sought his insights. Elliot accepted their congratulations with grace, but without forgetting their earlier doubts. Isaiah pulled Elliot aside as the room emptied. You okay? Still processing, Elliot admitted. 20 years mopping floors, and suddenly I'm co-director. You've always been more than your job title, Isaiah said. Now everyone else will see it too. 3 months later, under a cloudless blue sky, Elliot stood outside the finished Bell House building. What had once been an abandoned community center was now a gleaming structure of brick and glass, with gardens flanking the entrance and a playground visible around back. A crowd had gathered for the ribbon-cutting ceremony, neighborhood families, teachers from Booker Hale, city officials, and curious onlookers. Among them were faces Elliot recognized from years of quiet interactions. The mother whose electricity he'd helped restore one winter, the teenager whose broken glasses he'd fixed, the elderly couple whose porch steps he'd rebuilt. These were the people who had watched him struggle unseen for decades. Now they watched him stand beside Isaiah at the entrance of something neither man could have built alone. Dana Holloway approached, beaming with pride. Look at this crowd, Elliot. I keep expecting to wake up, he admitted. Well, don't wake up yet, she replied. You've got work to do. Nia joined them, clipboard in hand. We're ready, whenever you are. Isaiah stepped forward with a pair of oversized scissors. Care to do the honors with me? Elliot took his position, his work-roughened hands joining Isaiah's on the handle. As cameras flashed and the crowd cheered, he felt not triumph, but profound responsibility. The ribbon fell away, and Bell House officially opened its doors. On opening day, Elliot stood before Bell House, the spring sunlight warming his face. He wore no fancy suit, just clean dark slacks and a simple button-down shirt, with the sleeves rolled up to his elbows. His work boots were polished, but still showed years of wear. He'd insisted on keeping them, rather than buying new ones. "These boots know how to help people," he told Isaiah with a gentle smile. The sidewalk teemed with people, children clutching their parents' hands, teachers from Booker Hale High School, neighborhood workers, and city officials. Some carried homemade signs, "Thank you, Mr. Raines," and "Bell House, where everyone belongs." Isaiah stood beside Elliot, looking sharp in his tailored suit, but with the same warm grin he'd had as a teenager. In the front row, Dana Holloway dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. She caught Elliot's glance and gave him a trembling smile. 20 years of shared understanding passing between them. "Welcome to Bell House," Elliot began, his voice steady but humble. "This isn't just a building. It's a promise that no one walks alone when times get hard." He paused, looking at the faces before him. "Some of you I've known for years. Some I'm meeting today. But everyone here matters equally." A small girl raised her hand from the crowd. "Is there really free food inside?" Laughter rippled through the gathering, breaking the formality. "Yes, there is," Elliot answered with a chuckle. "And not just today. Every day. Because hungry people can't learn, can't dream, and can't build." He gestured toward the doors. "Let's go see what's waiting." The crowd followed Elliot and Isaiah inside. The entrance hall glowed with natural light from skylights above. To the right, a colorful mural captured immediate attention. It showed a janitor and a teenage boy sharing lunch on a school curb. The brick building behind them, unmistakably, Booker Hale High. The painting was beautiful but not sentimental. It captured dignity and struggle, the quiet heroism of everyday kindness. "This mural tells our beginning," Isaiah explained to the visitors, "but Bell House isn't about looking backward. It's about moving forward together." Elliot led the first group through a wide hallway into a commercial kitchen with gleaming counters and equipment. "We serve breakfast and dinner daily," he explained. "No forms to fill out, no proof of need. Just food when you're hungry, made with care and served with respect." He nodded to the staff, several of whom were former cafeteria workers from area schools. Next came the laundry room with rows of washers and dryers. "Clean clothes shouldn't be a luxury," Elliot said simply. "When your washing machine breaks and payday's a week away, you come here. When your water gets shut off, you come here. When your kids grow 3 inches and nothing fits, we've got a closet in the back." A young mother with a baby on her hip whispered, "Thank you," as they passed through. The tutoring wing bustled with activity even on opening day. College students and retired teachers had volunteered to staff it. Bookshelves lined the walls, and comfortable chairs formed reading nooks in the corners. "Education doesn't always happen in classrooms," Elliot told the group. "Sometimes it happens when someone has time to listen and explain one more time until it clicks." Pride shone brightest in Elliot's eyes when they reached the trades workshop at the rear of the building. Tools hung in perfect order on pegboards, hammers, wrenches, saws, and equipment for plumbing, electrical work, and carpentry. Several workbenches stood ready for lessons. "This," he said, his voice growing softer with emotion, "this is where young people will learn to fix what's broken. Not just objects, but confidence." He ran his hand along a workbench. "These skills saved me when I felt worthless. They'll do the same for others." Isaiah stepped forward as they returned to the main hall. "We have an announcement today that wasn't in the program." He nodded to Elliot. Elliot cleared his throat. "Bell House is creating a fellowship program for school custodians, cafeteria workers, and classroom aides across the district. These are the people who already hold our communities together without recognition. The fellowship provides training, support, and resources so they can expand the good they already do. Dana Holloway clapped loudly, starting a wave of applause. As the tours continued and music began playing in the community room, Elliot slipped outside for a moment of quiet. The day's emotions weighed heavily. Good weight, but heavy nonetheless. Across the street, half hidden by a bus stop shelter, stood a thin boy, about 12 or 13. He watched the celebration with hungry eyes, shifting from foot to foot. Elliot recognized the look immediately. The careful mask of someone trying to appear as though they're waiting for something rather than hoping for something. Without hesitation, Elliot went back inside to the buffet table. He filled 2 plates with fried chicken, mac and cheese, green beans, and cornbread. He grabbed 2 bottles of water and headed back outside. The boy tensed as Elliot approached, ready to flee. But Elliot just smiled and sat down on the curb, placing 1 plate beside him. "Looks like a good spot to eat," Elliot said casually. "Mind if I join you?" The boy eyed him suspiciously. "I'm waiting for someone." "That's fine," Elliot replied. "I just needed some fresh air. Crowds make me tired sometimes." He took a bite of chicken. "There's plenty of food inside. Shame to see it go to waste." The boy inched closer to the plate, hunger winning over caution. From the doorway of Bell House, Isaiah watched the scene unfold. His expression softened with recognition. 20 years had passed, but the moment looked almost identical. A curb, a meal, and an act of dignity disguised as casual kindness. The boy finally sat down beside Elliot, still keeping some distance between them. "Go ahead," Elliot said gently. "Eat first. We'll talk after." With that permission, the boy picked up the plate and began eating, slowly at first, then with growing hunger. Elliot didn't stare or ask questions. He just ate his own meal, occasionally commenting on the weather or the music drifting from Bell House. Inside the building, people celebrated a dream realized. Programs would grow, lives would change, systems would improve. But here on the curb, the essential truth continued. One human seeing another, offering food without judgment, creating space for trust to grow. The boy finished his plate and looked at Elliot directly for the first time. "Thanks," he said quietly. Elliot smiled. "You're welcome anytime. That door's always open." I hope you enjoyed that story. Please like the video and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. In the meantime, I have hand-picked 2 stories for you that I think you will enjoy. Have a great day.